So the first presentation today is entitled Data on Learning and Teaching Decision Making, an Italian Match. And this is authored by Serafina Pastore. I apologize in advance if I cannot pronounce correctly
It's okay, it's
the surnames. From the Università degli Studi di Bari, and also with Cataldo, Scarnera, the ISTAT, and Lucia, Pallucca, the San Giovanni, Bosco, Benedetto, 13. Well, this is the first presentation. Second presentation, the title is INVALSI Data and School Assessment, an empirical contribution to understand their validity by the means of psychological standardized tests and longitudinal design. This is by Cristina Semeraro, the Università di Studi di Bari, Pasquale Muso, Università degli Studi di Bari, Maria Dentamaro, Ise Mazzini Modugano de Bari as well, Rosalinda Casiva, Università degli Studi di Bari, and Gabriele Coppola, Università degli Studi di Bari. The last presentation is the title is The Connection Between the Mathematics INVALSI Test and the Teaching Practices, an Explorative Study by Federica Ferretti, the Libera Università di Bolzano, Fernando Arsarello, the Università di Torino, and Ira Vanini, the Università di Bologna. So we welcome the first presenter, and you have 20 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me, or I have to use the microphone?
Probably.
Better. Okay, thank you. Good morning. Thanks for coming. The paper I will present today, I hope will, give us the opportunity to engage in generative conversation about we as a research can collaborate to make educational research in this topic and try to improve our educational system. Let's start with an overview of the agenda. I will introduce briefly the conceptual framework with a focus on two concepts that are my research topics currently, assessment literacy and data literacy. And then I will present the study that has been carried out using the INVALSI data and make some reflection on what are the implications, for teachers and for researchers interested in the macro topic of educational assessment. Everybody is in this room who is somewhat familiar with the topic of educational assessment, and more specifically with formative assessment, know this guy, not only for his ties, but because since the publication in 1998 of the systematic review on formative assessment, Dylan Williams has been engaged in remind us and remind to teacher how data and data use are relevant for a sound assessment and for a good quality instruction. And the main question is not, is this assessment formative, but how this assessment improve learning. So it's really challenging for teachers to understand how to do and how to implement this kind of assessment in the classroom. We know that following the accountability trend and due to the technological changes, political expectation and public pressure, teachers are expected across countries to use data and to use a variety of data to inform and improve learning. However, research indicates that teachers struggle with using data, especially data gathered from large-scale assessment. And to use this kind of data to inform their practice and to use this data to improve student learning. So the main question, as you can read, are these. It is possible to counteract large-scale assessment effects and make this external assessment more relevant to teacher practice and student learning. And how can large assessment remote from the classroom serve instructional purposes? We know that the use of data to inform instructional decision is not new in the educational assessment field. Every day, teachers made educational decision for example, I don't know, instructional guidance to provide, that has been provided to their students. It is true, however, and many studies have shown this over the years, that teachers continue to use intuition, experience, and not to base their decision on data. The new aspect is how many scholars are addressed over the last 5 years is the link of the data use with the accountability systems. And so the problem is that when the data are in the hands of the school personnel, the challenge is to build the capacity of teacher to disaggregate the data, and in a meaningful way that can be address specific concern, and to use them to inform change in their instruction and the school. Some scholars, like Rick Stiggins in the youth context, are calling for radical change, and his position in this field are really radical, because he's calling for a ground-up redevelopment of the assessment in the educational and in the school. And in his last book, The Perfect Assessment System, he maps out the adjustments that are necessary in practice and in culture to assure a good assurance, a good accurate accountability, and some specific evidence of the instructional, of the individual mastery learning to support sound instructional decision and better learning. So in this perspective, these two concepts, assessment and data literacy, are considered as pivotal, as crucial. Let's see what we are talking about more deep. Assessment literacy in the past has been considered for teachers only in terms of rudiments about knowledge and skills about assessment that has been practiced in the classroom. This definition is aimed to represent assessment literacy as a complex interplay of different factors, different aspects, and it tried to combine micro and macro perspective. So in this idea, it's not only something that a teacher has, assessment is not something that a teacher has to do only in the classroom, but is related to the school system. Data literacy, instead, is this definition is of Mendinash and Gammer, 2012, and after 6 years of study, they produced this kind of definition, and they address the idea that data are not only relating to assessment, because there is until now the confliction between assessment literacy and data literacy, and these are the elements that have to be considered in terms of data literacy. Okay, this is in theory, but when we talk now to teachers and ask them to use data to make adjustment in their schools, some problems start to arise, and the classical iterative process of data analysis is not completed. There is something that has been missed. And the problem is that teachers have a lack of lack of skills in the understanding what question asked about data. They have some problems on how to understand what the results show and how to respond instructionally. Sometimes teachers cite issues such as data system, the principal leadership, the time, and the lack of knowledge about how to best use data to improve instruction. For the sake of the truth, sometimes research addressed the problem is professional development in schools. So Marsh and colleagues talk about the data practice divide. With this expression, they address the problem that teachers have is in interpreting the test results and to translate them into action. And two different explanations have been found over the years. The first is focused on the lack of assessment literacy teachers demonstrate. And the second one is related to the fact that data does not feed the information teacher needs. Sometimes there are or too many or few data, so teachers are not able to make inference. Given this assumption, these are the questions that we have for our study. It is possible to analyze large-scale assessment data, INVALSI data in our case, at micro level, and how? And what are theoretical requirements and practical implications for teachers, and what are main aspects to be considered in teacher professional development path? This is a case study. There is no generalization, of course. In order to answer to this question, we have decided this study, and we are focused on two aspects: the interpretation of the INVALSI scores and how teachers can be able to contextualize data, comparing and interpreting data with other information. My colleagues started with an analysis at macro level of the INVALSI data related to the administration of May 2019, and with a focus on grade 5, and consider the three subject matter: Italian, maths, and English. What has been discovered? Nothing of interesting, because we've found substantial coherence and alignment on what aggregate data and disaggregate data say. The problem is that the analysis at micro level, it's so complicated and so long, so many rows, so many columns, and despite the good result, this perspective after 3 months of work has been left because too long and with a workload too expensive for teachers in terms of time. So what we have found, for example, is one of the problem in the codes of students. Sometimes we have found some errors, and we have to start again and try to understand what was the gap in the data set. What we have decided to do then, we started to try to implement an interim assessment in the school. Why? Because in this way we should align in some way teachers and ask them to design and validate standardized tests modeling the INVALSI test, and they will be administered, if we are in time, this month, and then in December, and again in the new year in 2020. For all the classrooms, so 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, because we have also the middle school. What are the implications for teachers? The first problem has been to convince them to read and know very well the INVALSI framework. This was the first challenge for me, because the 90% of teachers sometimes didn't read and don't know what INVALSI framework reference say. And the professional development has been focused on how to design, gather, and use and report data on students' level of learning. And they have tried to build themselves, to make themselves this kind of test. So the problem is now to address and define, a frame of interpretation for them. Because if they really understand what are the learning goals with this kind of test, they can gather some information that are different from the information they gather every day in the classroom. So they will be able to compare their different classroom in their school and make some inferences to make adjustment and align much more with the INVALSI perspective. Just to conclude, the teacher wants to be involved in this kind of activities, but sometimes they present a lot of difficulties really because they have the lack not only in technical aspects but also in culture about assessment. She also says all the times that teachers are not researchers, and this is true. This is true. So what we need for the future is to design effective score reports for teachers that visualize test results that are appropriate to identify action and information need to useful for teachers and for student learning. Thank you.